Amber was alone by the roadside, feeling the chill of the early morning that penetrated her body. Beside her were two other girls, both with frightened and confused looks, just like her. The heavy silence of the night was broken by the distant sound of sirens, which soon approached, bringing the hope that help was on the way. When the police arrived, their faces showed concern and determination. They knew that something terrible had happened, and they quickly began to ask questions, trying to understand the situation. As the police worked to uncover what had happened, they quickly realized that the three girls were from the Daniels family, known in town for taking in many children. The family had always been a refuge for children who needed love and protection, and the discovery that Amber and her friends came from there only heightened the gravity of the situation. With heavy hearts, the officers headed to the Daniels house, but upon arriving, they found the front door wide open, gently swaying in the night breeze. The scene that unfolded before them was terrifying. What they found inside was one of the most shocking invasions the state of Georgia had ever witnessed. The furniture was in disarray, and there were signs of a struggle in every corner. The smell of fear and desperation hung in the air like a dark cloud. The walls, which had once been a symbol of warmth and safety, now seemed to scream the story of a night of terror. The officers, on high alert, soon realized they were dealing with something much larger than a simple burglary. The brutal nature of the crime indicated that a mass murderer was on the loose. Thus began an unrelenting hunt for the infamous Santa Killer. The figure hiding behind this terrifying identity was not just an ordinary criminal. He was a predator, someone who had shattered the peace and security of an entire community. The search for the murderer quickly transformed into a massive joint effort, bringing together hundreds of police officers, agents, and security agencies. Helicopters hovered over the area, and search teams spread out through the woods and surrounding areas, trying to find any clues that would lead to the culprit. The sound of sirens and hurried footsteps echoed through the town, creating an atmosphere of urgency and determination. It was an impressive spectacle, the largest number of officers Amber had ever seen in her life. As the police worked, Amber and the other girls were cared for by social workers, who tried to calm them and offer a bit of comfort amid the chaos. Amber looked at the faces of those people, trying to understand what had happened, while the image of her home and the family she loved grew more and more distant and confusing. The town, once quiet, was now united around a single goal: to find the Santa Killer and bring justice to the victims and their families. Days passed, and the tension rose with each moment. Amber knew that the fight wouldn't be easy, but she held hope that, in the end, the truth would be discovered and that safety would return to her life and that of her sisters. Amber Daniels, who was only 10 years old, was kidnapped and went through very difficult moments with her two younger sisters, but she managed to escape and outsmart the man who kept them captive. She solved her own case and ensured that he was punished for everything he did to them. On the morning of December 4, 1997, the sun was yet to rise. This story of Amber and the Santa Killer is just beginning, and you won't want to miss out. Subscribe to our channel now to follow every twist and turn of the hunt for the criminal. And the fog gently covered the vast plains of Bacon County, Georgia. It was exactly 5 a.m. when a farmer, accustomed to the sound of cattle and the smell of wet earth, was working on his property. He was checking the fences when, suddenly, he noticed three small figures walking slowly along the deserted road. Intrigued and concerned, the farmer approached. As he got closer, he realized that the girls were barefoot, wearing only pajamas, and their expressions were filled with fear and confusion. One of them, with messy brown hair and big eyes, lifted her head and said in a trembling voice, "We're from Santa Claus, Georgia." The farmer was surprised to hear this. Santa Claus was a small, quiet town located 50 miles to the north. How could those children have gotten so far? And more importantly, why were they alone in the middle of the road on such a cold morning? Realizing the gravity of the situation, the farmer immediately felt a tightness in his heart. He knew something was wrong. Without hesitation, he took out his cell phone and called 911, his voice filled with concern as he explained that there were three lost and barefoot girls near his farm. He described their appearance and the alarming situation they were in, hoping help would arrive quickly. Shortly after, the Bacon County Police arrived at the scene. The flashing lights of the patrol cars cut through the darkness, and the officers quickly got out, ready to respond to the emergency. The girls, still shivering from cold and fear, were taken to the station, where they could feel a little more secure. In the station, the police were determined to find out where the girls lived and what had happened to them. Amber, the oldest of the three at only 10 years old, took the lead. Her small hands trembled as she spoke, but there was determination in her voice. "We're sisters," she began. "We're part of the Daniels family." Amber looked around, trying to remember the way back home as memories swirled in her mind. She took a deep breath and gave the address, but she knew that the story she needed to tell would be much more complicated. The officer listened attentively, jotting down every word. He felt the urgency and seriousness of the situation. Amber and her sisters were far from home, in an unknown world, not knowing what had happened to their family. The station, with its fluorescent lights and the sounds of printers and ringing phones, became the new setting for a story that was beginning to unfold. A story of fear, courage, and the desperate search for safety. Sheriff Mike Harlan drove along the winding road that led to the Daniels house, his heart heavy with concern. He knew that the three girls had been found alone, and his mission was to understand what had happened. The thought of finding anxious parents, or at least some responsible adult waiting at the door, gave him hope. However, as he approached the house, a strange feeling of unease began to wash over him. When he parked the car and got out, the air was thick with an unusual silence. There were no sounds of children laughing or the clinking of pots in the kitchen. As sheriff, Mike was used to dealing with complicated situations, but the absence of any sign of life made his protective instincts kick in. He walked toward the front door, which was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the cold morning breeze. "Hello? Is anyone home?" he called, his voice echoing in the stillness. But the only response was the silence, heavy and oppressive. Cautiously, Mike pushed the door, which opened slowly, revealing an interior that seemed frozen in time. The living room was in disarray, with toys scattered across the floor and cushions displaced on the sofa. But what caught his attention the most was the strange and eerie atmosphere that lingered there. He exhaled a deep sigh, trying to brace himself for what he might find next. As soon as he entered, a series of sounds began to fill the air. The persistent noise of a clock radio playing, the repetitive melody of a security alarm beeping, and, most distressing of all, the shrill, desperate cries of a baby. The sound of the crying cut through the air like a knife, making Mike's heart race. He followed the sound, each step heavier than the last. Upon entering the kitchen, the scene that unfolded before him was heartbreaking. The clock radio continued to play a cheerful tune, contrasting with the alarming situation around him. The table was set, with plates and glasses ready for a meal that never happened. The security alarm, which seemed to scream for everyone's attention, only intensified the sense of urgency. And, in a corner, a crib rocked slowly, a baby crying inconsolably within it. Mike quickly approached the crib, his heart aching. He felt the urgency of the situation. There was no time to lose. The baby's cries were a clear plea, a call for someone to intervene. He grabbed his radio and called for backup, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his body. "We need assistance here. There's a baby in the house, and we can't find the adults." As he awaited a response, Mike looked around, analyzing every detail of the house. He knew he needed to act quickly. Something was very wrong, and his experience as a sheriff alerted him that every second counted. The safety of the girls and the baby depended on him, and the darkness of that morning was about to reveal secrets that no one wanted to hear. As Sheriff Mike Harlan walked through the house, his heart raced, and each step seemed to echo in the solitude of that morning. He was on high alert, senses heightened, when he noticed subtle movement beneath the table in the living room. Curious and cautious, he crouched down and saw a little boy, wide-eyed and filled with fear. The boy was very quiet, as if he were hiding from danger. With a timid gesture, the little boy motioned to the officer, pointing his small hand toward a nearby room. Anxiety grew in Harlan's chest, for he knew that the boy's silent movement meant something was very wrong. Following the boy's gaze, the sheriff noticed a dark stain on the door of the room. Blood. The sight made his stomach churn, but he knew he needed to act. "Stay here, I'll be right back," he whispered to the boy before standing up and carefully pushing the door open. The wood creaked slightly, as if it were also apprehensive about what was about to be revealed. Upon entering the room, the smell of blood and despair hit him hard. Before him, the scene was devastating. A young woman lay motionless on the floor, her lifeless eyes fixed on a distant point. Harlan's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the scene. He took another step forward and, in the corner of the bed, noticed two shapes covered by yellowed, stained sheets. As he approached, his stomach turned again as he realized there were two more bodies, a man and a woman, their lives tragically interrupted, also showing no signs of breathing. But amidst that horror, the piercing sound of a whimper caught his attention. Looking to the side, Harlan saw a baby, with a flushed face and tears streaming down its cheeks. The anguished cries of the little one were a desperate call for help that cut through the heavy atmosphere of the room. Determined not to let the innocent suffer any longer, Harlan decided he needed to do a quick search of the rest of the house. Moving quickly, he opened the door to one of the children's rooms, and upon entering, his heart sank. A horrible scene unfolded before his eyes. A little boy lay on the bed, motionless, surrounded by a sea of blood. The silence of the room was deafening, and the sight of the injured boy made Harlan's blood run cold. The uncertainty about the presence of a possible attacker on the loose kept him on high alert. Without thinking twice, he approached the crying baby, and in a quick, firm motion, he carefully picked up the injured boy, trying not to cause him any more pain. Cradling the baby in one arm, Harlan held the hurt little boy in the other hand. his protective instincts intensifying with every passing second. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he hurried out of the house, the urgency to escape that horrendous scene and get the children to safety pounding in his heart. With his eyes fixed on the open door, Harlan stepped into the cold morning air, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He needed to ensure that those children were safe, far from the horror they had witnessed. And as the sun began to rise on the horizon, he knew that the work of unraveling the mysteries of that day was just beginning. At the Bacon County Police Station, investigators were asking the three girls what had happened. Amber, the oldest, began to tell her story and mentioned a name that would change everything. She said she was taken from her room that night by a man named Scott. The year was 1995, and the sun shone through the dusty curtains of the modest house where Amber, a 10-year-old girl, lived with her mother, Kim. The soft morning light illuminated the small space, revealing a living room that was both a home and a battleground. Kim was fighting the demons of alcoholism, a battle that often sent her spiraling to rock bottom, causing Amber and her siblings to be placed in foster homes over the years. Those moments were confusing and painful, marked by separations and the uncertainty of not knowing when or if they would return home. But as time passed, something was changing within Kim. Determined to rise again, she was resolved to leave alcohol behind and provide a loving and safe home for her three children. Alcoholics Anonymous meetings became a new beacon of hope in her life. There, surrounded by people who also struggled with their addictions, Kim found strength and inspiration. It was in this supportive environment that she met Danny Daniels, a man also in recovery who brought his own story of struggles and triumphs. Love blossomed between them, a connection that grew from mutual understanding and the determination to build a different future. Together, Kim and Danny decided that this new life would be free of alcohol, a commitment that would transform not only their lives but also the lives of the children who depended on them. Each day was a new opportunity to rebuild what had been lost, and they were determined to do it together. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived, the day Amber had dreamed of. The authorities, seeing Kim's sincere effort to recover, allowed Amber to come back home, where her mother was waiting for her. The emotion that washed over Amber as she crossed the threshold was indescribable. She ran through the familiar once-abandoned hallways, inhaling the comforting scent of the home she loved so much. With tears in her eyes and a radiant smile on her face, she threw herself into her mother's arms. And there was Danny, arms wide open, ready to embrace her into her new family. He smiled warmly, and Amber felt a wave of genuine love. It was a magical moment, a mix of relief and happiness that touched her heart. The feeling of having her mother by her side, along with that kind man, made everything seem possible again. As Kim and Danny got married, the families came together, and the house filled with new laughter and voices. Jessica, Danny's teenage daughter, joined Amber, along with her siblings, Brooke and Bryant. Now, they were all living together under one roof, creating new memories in a home that was rising from the ashes. The house, once marked by shadows and uncertainties, was now full of life. Toys scattered across the floor, laughter echoing through the hallways, and the smell of fresh cookies coming from the oven made the atmosphere vibrant. Amber's mother, with Danny's help, was fulfilling her dream of providing a safe and loving home. Amber looked around, soaking in every moment, every laugh, and every hug. Finally, the promise of a better future was coming true. Hope was back, and with it, the unconditional love that everyone dreamed of feeling and sharing. Before, she was the one who needed help taking care of others. But now, with her life in order, Kim wanted to open the doors of their home to more children, creating a welcoming place for all. Since she was little, I remembered how our family began to take in foster children. It was so much fun to have new friends to play with. One of the first children the Daniels welcomed was a girl named Joanne. I knew she would be my best friend. She was the same age as me, super nice, and I loved her red hair. Joanne's biological mother could come to visit us, and she usually brought her son, Jerry Scott Heidler, along. Jerry, whom the kids called Scott, was 18 years old and was super nice to all of us. He always played, jumped on the trampoline, and even taught us how to fish. I remember how he would put me on his back and lift me up on his shoulders. Jerry was a lot of fun and always showed a lot of affection and kindness. He seemed like a normal person, just like anyone who came in and out of our house. But then, suddenly, one day he stopped coming. 2 years went by, and Joanne, his sister, went back to their mother's house, leaving the Daniels family. Since then, neither I nor my family had heard from Jerry. Now it's 1997, and the Daniels house is full, with 3 more foster children besides the 4 of us original kids. With Christmas approaching, everyone is excited to celebrate together. The family has already set up the Christmas tree, and we are just a few weeks away from the party. Amber was sleeping peacefully, like any other night, when suddenly she woke up startled. Even though she hadn't seen Jerry in years, she recognized him immediately. He was shouting at her, "Wake up, wake up! You need to wake up!" Amber was scared. In the distance, she could hear her siblings crying in the next room. Jerry said they needed to get out of the house quickly. I was so confused and scared, hearing the girls cry. I didn't know what was happening. Jerry grabbed my arm and ran with me down the hallway. She was still confused and asked him where their parents were. Jerry explained that Mom and Dad weren't home. They had already left with the other kids and asked him to come get her and her sisters, Amanda and Brooke. But just as they were about to go out the front door, Amber looked back and saw her little brother Corey, who was only 4 years old, hiding under the kitchen table. From a distance, Amber heard her little brother Gabe crying, "Why are we leaving them? Why are we leaving them?" Jerry replied, "Your mom and dad are going to come back and get them." Jerry had always been very nice to them, so it felt safe to go with him. They all got into his van, and he said he would take them to see their parents. But as he drove down a deserted road, the girls began to get more and more worried and started to cry. They didn't know where they were going or where their parents were. After driving for more than half an hour, the car slowed down, turned onto a side street, and stopped underneath a bridge. Jerry turned off the engine and asked Amber to get in the back seat with him while he told Amanda and Brooke to go to the front. At that moment, I was getting more and more scared and confused about what was happening. The man started taking off his clothes, and I saw a knife in his boot and a gun on the floor of the van. Then, he came closer to me, Amber, who was only 10 years old. I was crying, and he told me that if I didn't stop crying, he would hurt my sisters. I was really scared and stopped crying because I didn't want him to hurt them. When he finally stopped, he told me to put my clothes back on. I did what he said while he got out of the car and went back to the driver's seat. Without saying anything, Jerry started driving again. The three sisters were silent, terrified, and not knowing what to do. Amber wondered where Jerry was taking them. Suddenly, the car stopped. It was early morning, and Amber realized they were at the top of a bridge. Jerry grabbed the gun and forced Amber, Brooke, and Amanda to get out of the van. He kept threatening the girls as he moved closer to the edge of the bridge. Below, the water rushed by quickly. The three children were very scared, huddled close together, not knowing what was going to happen. But then, suddenly, Jerry threw the gun over the bridge and into the water. At that moment, Amber thought, "This is our chance. Get out of this van. Run. We can hide in the woods. Just run as fast as you can." The three girls, barefoot, started to run away from the van. Behind them, Jerry shouted for them to stop and come back. Amber heard him getting closer and ran even faster. He was bigger than her and her sisters, but Amber believed they could outrun him. But Jerry was quickly closing in on Brooke and grabbed her arm tightly, stopping her immediately. Jerry told Brooke that if she didn't go back to the van, he would throw her off the bridge and she would never see her family again. Amber was in a very difficult situation. She had to choose between saving herself or risking her younger sister's life. She knew the only way to protect Amanda was by obeying what Jerry wanted. So, Amber and her sister Amanda slowly started walking back to Jerry and Brooke. When they were together again, Jerry ordered them to go back to the van while he took them away from home. He turned onto a road, and then Amber asked again, "Where are you taking us? What are we doing?" Jerry got angry and started shouting. Soon, he stopped in a small dead end and told the girls to wait there for 5 minutes until he came back. Jerry continued speaking. "I'll be back in 5 minutes. You better be here." The girls stayed silent, watching Jerry's car drive away. They didn't dare to move until the lights of his car had completely disappeared. After counting to 65 seconds, Amber said to her sisters, "Let's run." She told the girls, "We need to find help. We have to tell someone what happened. We need to find our parents and go back home." As they ran down the road, the girls spotted a farmhouse in the distance. But suddenly, the headlights of a car turned on right in front of them. Amber pulled her sisters down and made them throw themselves into the ditch to avoid being seen. The car began to slow down, and Amber felt a chill in her stomach. They thought it was all over. Amber was paralyzed with fear, but when the man got out of the car, it wasn't the attacker. It was a local farmer, who quickly offered help. Amber let out a sigh of relief and asked her sisters to come out of their hiding place. The farmer took the girls to a safe place and called the police. Soon, the sheriff arrived and took the three of them to the station. To her surprise, all the family members Amber hadn't seen in years were there. So she asked, "Where are Mom and Dad?" At that moment, Corey approached and said, "They're dead." Amber got angry and replied, "Stop lying. That's not true." When Amber looked around the room and saw all the adults and her relatives, all silent, she realized that what her little brother said was true. Her mother was no longer alive. After everything that had happened that night, Amber was in shock to find out that both her mother and stepfather were gone. She began to cry but was also determined. Amber knew who had done this and wanted to make sure he was arrested and punished. So she told the police a very important detail. The name of the man who did all this, Jerry Scott Heidler. He was the brother of one of the children living with the Daniels family and used to visit frequently, playing with the kids and showing inappropriate interest in the oldest daughter, Jessica. The police began to look for information about Jerry and soon discovered that he had previous run-ins with the law. He had been arrested once for driving under the influence, so they had his picture in their records. The investigators showed Amber several photographs so she could identify the man who had kidnapped her. I have 6 photos here. You may know or not know who's in them, and that's okay. I want you to look at them, and if you recognize anyone, let me know. The police show a photo to Amber. Is this the guy? She replies, yes, that's Scott Heidler. To help the police understand what happened that night, Amber is invited to tell everything she remembers. With courage, she speaks about what Jerry did to her and where they went. I had to show them where the dirt road was that he took us down. She remembered every word he said and everything he did. With the information Amber provided, the police went back to the Daniels house and began searching for evidence of the crime. They collected fingerprints, a cigarette butt, and DNA samples to help solve the case. The investigators believe that on that same night, around 1 a.m., Jerry entered the Daniels family home through the back window. Then, he went to the room of the oldest daughter, Jessica, who was 16, and tried to approach her. The detectives thought she must have gotten scared and run to her parents' room to protect herself. But Jerry, who had been in the house several times, knew where the family kept their shotgun. He went to the closet, grabbed the gun, and entered the parents' bedroom. Unfortunately, he did very bad things, harming Jessica, as well as Kim, Danny, and Brian, who was only 8 years old, until the gun was out of bullets. After that, Jerry entered Amber's room and took her along with her sisters. With all the information that Amber provided and the evidence they found at the crime scenes, the police were ready to arrest Jerry. But he was still on the run, and no one could find him. The police used all available resources to track him down, and Amber had never seen such a police presence before. The investigators believed that Jerry might be hiding at his mother's house in Alma, Georgia, which was only an hour away from where everything happened. Many police officers went there. But when they arrived, they found no sign of him. They began searching around the house, and after a while, they finally discovered Jerry hiding under the floorboards in a small space. Jerry Scott Heidler was charged and arrested for 4 murders, 3 kidnappings, and burglary. He did not attempt to escape and confessed to everything, saying it felt like a dream to him. Meanwhile, Jerry was in jail waiting for trial, and Amber was trying to cope with the tragedy that had happened to her family. She had lost her mother, father, older sister, and younger brother, and this happened long before Christmas. Christmas had always been a special time for their family, filled with traditions. But that year, when the night of December 24th finally arrived, there was no celebration or joy, only sadness. It was at that moment that Amber realized they would never return. On August 30th, 1999, the trial of Jerry Scott Heidler began. Amber, now 13 years old, had her interview shown during the trial, and it was used as evidence against him. The entire community was very sad and shaken by what had happened in the small town. The jury took only 20 minutes to decide. They handed down the death sentence. On December 2, 1999, Jerry Scott Heidler was convicted of 4 homicides, kidnapping, child sexual abuse, and burglary. He was sentenced to death and is now on death row. This was the only time I saw Jerry Heidler show any remorse. He lowered his head, and tears streamed down his face. For Amber, as long as he couldn't get out and hurt anyone else, that was all that mattered. Now, more than 20 years have passed since the tragedy. Amber decided that she would not let her past control her life. She was determined to live life to the fullest. Amber's mother also overcame many challenges to ensure her children grew up feeling loved. Now, Amber is creating her own family. She gives her son a lot of love and attention and wants to make their home as warm and beautiful as the one her mother worked hard to build. Knowing that I can watch my son grow is incredible, but it makes me miss my mom. He is my future. Vaden means everything to me. I pray he never goes through anything I went through as a child. I pray he has the happy days I had. I would do anything for him. Amber realized that what happened to her as a child was not her fault. She left the anger of the past behind, understanding that it doesn't help create love in her family today. I'm at a point in my life where, if I could tell Jerry I forgive him for what he did, I would. I can't change the past, but I can make my future better for me and my family. If I keep hating him forever, what's the point? I always want to be the best person.